This video is brought to you by Skillshare. So I've been filming with the Blackmagic Pocket 6K for over a year now. And through that time, I've learned a lot about it. I found out things that I love. I found out things that I dislike. But throughout all of that, I do get one common question. And that common comment is, what are your settings? So in this video, I'm gonna walk you through the settings I use to film the films that I film and just the overall look at my Pocket 6K. What's going on, guys? Before we get started, shout out to Chance Montgomery. We have been working in collaboration for this new merch that I am wearing. We are working on some new hats and some new hoodies. You know, just that minimalistic aesthetic for the hoodie and giving you that abstract art look for the hats. If you wanna be informed, I'll leave a link to my website below. You can sign up for my newsletter. I think I'm gonna reach out to people that way who are interested. But enough about this dope new hat. I am going to be talking to you about the Blackmagic. So I've been filming with this thing for quite a while and I love it. Like, I love a lot of camera gear, but the Blackmagic is the most simplistic to get started using right out the gate. So if you are new to Blackmagic, if you just got your Blackmagic, then this is the video for you, because I'm gonna walk you through the things I have set up on here, which is not much, to be real honest with you. And I'm gonna walk you through the things I keep in mind when filming. So looking at my initial screen, these are the things that I keep in mind when filming with my Blackmagic. So I have it cut on here. It's a little hard to film the screen, but this is what I keep in mind. When I'm filming, I'm usually filming with my Sigma 18 to 35 millimeter 1.8. I always usually keep it at 1.8 because I love the shallow depth of field. I have done multiple interviews with the Sigma, always at 35, always at 1.8. And the sceneries that I shoot, I usually shoot them same thing. It is just a glorious lens. And I see myself in the future actually getting a 35 millimeter cinema lens, because that is pretty much all I use the Sigma for. So when it comes to f-stop and focal range, that's my favorite to shoot at with the Blackmagic. And of course, shutter speed is always at 180, and resolution, I mostly film everything in 6K RAW at full res at 50 frames a second. Unless I'm doing an interview, unless I am doing, something that needs to be in real time, like my latest, Adidas short film ad, I film everything at 50. I just love the way this camera just looks when it comes to slow motion footage. And 50 frames per second is not that slow, and it's just enough for me. So looking through the menu here, when I film with the camera, I always have the dynamic range set to film. This will give you the best dynamic range in the camera. It doesn't give you a baked in look. It shoots flat as possible. So if you're filming with this thing, always have it in film. And if you don't have the firmware update yet, get the firmware update for the Blackmagic, because you can get Gen 5 colors, which overall help your process out when you're color grading footage. When you're filming, everything will look the absolute best. Now, you can set off-speed recording on this thing, and I pretty much never, ever use my off-speed recording because I rarely shoot in 120 frames per second with this camera. Because there's like this 3x crop, because it's 2.7K, I usually never do it. I have the Sony a7S III. It does 4K at 120 frames per second. So it matches the workflow, and I rarely ever have to use it on this thing in particular. So that's just my personal taste. Now, I always use an SSD. If you can afford CFast cards, go for them. But your boy is cheap, and your boy bought SSDs. You can get a terabyte for like $200 or under $200 at this point, and it's just really hard to beat. All right, let's go through this. Time-lapse mode is really cool because I've used it occasionally when I'm going out and filming. I mainly use time lapses for opening shots to show the sun rising or to establish the area that I'm shooting in. And this has the easiest time-lapse mode out of any freaking camera I've ever used. 10 out of 10 would recommend. It just makes life so much easier. Did my battery just die? Well, all right. So one thing about the Blackmagic is the shortest battery life on earth. Okay, sorry about that. Truthfully, when I film with this thing, I usually always have them plugged in if I can, because I haven't even been filming for 8.5 minutes. All right, so monitor settings are next on my tabs list. This is how I use monitors. I have these 3 function buttons up top, customized to be focus peaking, false color, and LUTs. Those are the only 3 things I ever use when going out towards a monitor. I always use focus peaking because you like to see what you have in focus. I use false color for exposure, and I just use LUTs for when I'm showing a client an image of what things could potentially look like. So that is really all I ever do when outputting towards a monitor. I keep things simplistic, and I try to keep as much stuff on camera and away from the touchscreen as possible, because if there's a battery pack back here, I like to operate my camera just from the buttons up top. When it comes to audio, I am most likely running a boom mic into my audio, and I have one here right off camera, but I always use the XLR inputs on the side. I always use the phantom power when going out to my microphone because they require it. And yeah, I rarely use anything else when it comes to audio. When it comes to actual setup, always use shutter angle. I never use shutter speed on this thing because setting your camera to 180-degree shutter angle is just the best thing ever. Function buttons, I already told you those. Those are focus peaking, false color, and my display LUTs. The Bluetooth, I rarely use the Bluetooth because I film with the Sony a7S III now. I used to use the Bluetooth when I was focusing on myself. It's really, really handy in case you've never used it, but I never use it in a professional setting, so it's there though. And the last 2 tabs on the menu system are presets and LUTs, which I never use either of those 2. You can import your own LUTs, but I find that the one that's just a Rec 709 LUT works perfectly fine. And those are the settings that people usually ask me for. I don't believe they are truly that important in the long run. I believe keeping in mind your exposure, keeping in mind your composition, and focusing on the story are much more important aspects to focus on than your settings, because settings are just a part of the process. I'm always having them at 180-degree shutter. I like to film things with a low aperture. Like, that's just my personal taste. And I notice I'm always using an ND filter up front, whether it be the Peter McKinnon filter, whether it be the Polar Pro Basecamp set, just something that helps me keep the 180-degree shutter rule for 50 frames per second, which is 1/100th. But just remember, if you're filming this thing in RAW, like, it's really, really hard to mess up with this camera because it's so forgiving. So that's why I say this is the camera to get if you're a beginner. If you're somebody who just got into the Blackmagic, filming with this thing, one, it's gonna take up a lot of space, but the footage that you get from it is just something that's hard to beat for the price, honestly, because I don't know, it's really hard to describe how much I love this thing as a budget cinema camera. But yes, perfecting your craft and perfecting your knowledge and skill set and focus is one of the much more important things to me other than your settings. And I perfect my focus, here comes the segue, through Skillshare. If you don't know already, I freaking love Skillshare because it's something I actually use. It's something that I used growing up to learn about cameras, to learn about design, and to learn about the things that I love to do today. And I thank you, Skillshare, for making this video possible. Now, for those of you who don't know about Skillshare, Skillshare is an online learning platform that has thousands and thousands of classes for creators like you and me, because I consider us all creators in some form of fashion, because there's a little artist in all of us. But I've learned design, I've learned photography, film, and a multitude of things through Skillshare. And one of the things that I'm learning at the moment is how to freaking do YouTube a little better. And that's being taught by MKBHD. One of my favorite people on earth is teaching you how to plan, shoot, and edit YouTube videos. And the plan part is where I've been struggling, and I want to do better. So this class is perfectly timed for me. And if you don't know, Skillshare is a little different. It is curated for learning, so there's no ads. You can keep your focus right into your class, and you can just deep dive into the things that you want to know. And if you sign up for a yearly membership, it ends up being like less than $10 a month, which I really, really appreciate, because perfecting your craft and learning more and more things can get expensive when you're buying constant courses. Trust me, I know. I think the first course I bought for photography was like $400, and I could have had like 3 or 4 years worth of Skillshare learning for just that one course. So if you're interested, I'll leave my link below and you can get a free trial of their premium membership. I would personally recommend it. It's something I've always used, and it's just great that they can partner with me for a YouTube video to make this thing possible. So thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. But with that all being said, that's all I have for you today, guys. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you loved it, consider subscribing, because I'm bringing you more content just like this every week. So you guys stay safe, you're loved, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.